Hello and welcome to Recalibrating with me, Sharee Johnson, where you'll hear healthcare professionals and others sharing their stories of recalibrating life when the unexpected happened. As a psychologist and a coach, I've been listening deeply to people's stories for 35 years, and I've come to believe two things about people. The first is having witnessed so many incredible stories of hope, adaptability, and human capacity, I truly believe that we are all capable of so much more than we really think we are. In times of challenge, humans have demonstrated that over and over again. Here on the Recalibrating podcast, you'll get to hear amazing stories of healthcare professionals and others pivoting, overcoming, and recalibrating their lives. The second thing that the research and my experiences as a psychologist have shown me is that humans need each other. We need people. When we have support around us, when we tell each other our stories, when we connect through the reality of living our lives, we do so much better than when we pull back and hide what's really going on for us. Together on this podcast, we're going to unearth and amplify what helps us as humans individually and collectively to recalibrate in ways that help us change, grow, adapt, even surprise ourselves when life throws us a curveball. This podcast offers you the chance to be inspired and encouraged to meet the unexpected in your life with grace, skills, and a belief in your own human capacity. Life is full of opportunities to recalibrate with agency, the right mindset, the right resources, and the right community. I'm really excited today because I get to introduce you to Dr. Sabine Fonderson. Sabine and I met during the COVID years online, and it's just really exciting to have another long conversation with her. So Sabine is a general practitioner. She's also a healthcare entrepreneur and a speaker with over 20 years of international medical experience. She's worked across 4 continents, specialising in family medicine and epidemiology, and is the founder of Expat Health Clinic, where she helps bridge the gap between international patients and the Dutch healthcare system through personalised and preventative care. Having lived and worked in the Netherlands, in the UK and Scotland, Cameroon and in the USA, Dr. Fonderson brings a unique global perspective on healthcare, diversity and the realities of practicing medicine in the second language. Alongside her clinical work, she develops AI-powered tools and workflows that help doctors reduce documentation overload, work more efficiently, and prevent burnout. Through speaking engagements and educational initiatives, Sabine shares insights on healthcare innovation, digital transformation in medicine, expat health, and sustainable work-life balance for healthcare professionals. Sabine's mission is simple: to make healthcare more accessible, efficient, and human-centred for both patients and clinicians. Welcome to Recalibrating with Sharee Johnson, Sabine. It's so lovely to see you again.
It's great to see you, Sharee. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm looking forward to this. It's one of the things that we hear often is it's the system, and I think you have such a unique insight onto lots of systems that we'll be able to dig into. But before we get there, you work in primary care as a general practitioner in family medicine in the Netherlands, in The Hague. You also have an interest in AI. You're developing tools for the clinic. You've recently given a TED Talk. You have a podcast. You're on social media, and I think you're also studying. So how on earth do you do all of that? You're a mum as well. So can you tell
Yeah,
us a little bit about the typical month in the life of Dr. Sabine at this stage of your career?
it's interesting. Thank you. A typical month in my life, I want to just say that yes, it sounds like a lot, okay? And some people say to me, "Do you ever sleep?" I do. I actually get some good sleep, and what I've done in the years leading to where we are today is finding my true core, what I like to do. So no matter how busy it is, no matter how the system gets me quite frustrated, there are times that I end work and I'm like, I am quitting my job. But the next morning, I'm like, I'm going back to my job because you have to find something that you can go back to that gives you peace of mind. And actually, when you look at what you're doing to recalibrate, to get that balance again. And when we met around COVID, that's what I was really struggling with. I was really struggling with How do I stay being a doctor, be a mom, but also do things that I really like and enjoy? Because exactly what you said in the introduction, doctors seem to think that this is all I have. I'm a doctor and that's all I do for life. I'm here to treat people and care for people, and that's it. And I was thinking about something else. I'm like, but I have other interests. I like other things. I'm pretty ambitious, and I tend to say yes to a lot of things. And I used to feel bad about that, but now I'm like, no, I love saying yes to everything. And if I say yes to something, it's because I like it. So a typical month will look like being at the practice, coming home, making dinner for my daughter, taking time with her, helping her with her homework, helping her prepare for exams that she has, and very important is working out. I work out for at least 5 days a week, and I'm doing strength training. I'm doing cardio, and that's what helps me balance things out again.
Mm. Has that ebbed and flowed, Sabine? Have there been times where there hasn't been that regular exercise in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think I really got down to this particular um, system or regime that I'm doing right now for a year. I took a time off a year ago in March, and I had to because I had taken over the practice that I currently own. And it was one of the most disruptive, chaotic periods in my life because I'd taken over a practice and I got hit with a lot of things in one go. People were leaving, patients were going to other doctors because they didn't like the new owner, right? So there was a new boss in town, and they were like, "Who are you? I'm used to this other doctor for 30 years, and you're coming over to take care of me." Oh no! So that made me feel very bad. I felt there was something wrong with me. Some of the team that I had taken over, they decided to leave. I was basically stuck with a practice that I had no um, bond with, and I had to take care of everything. So I was spending a lot of time focusing on building this practice. So my day would start sometimes at 4 in the morning, and it would end at like 9 in the evening. And I had just enough time to say hello to my daughter and, eat something and go to bed. So what happened was that, and she even came to me one time and said, "Mom, you really need to think about your mental health," because I was so negative about work. So once your teenage daughter tells you that, it's it's a moment in time when you're thinking, okay, maybe I do need to take a step back and really look around and see what is it that's important to me. And what's important to me is my family, it's myself, and my work comes like somewhere around there. Because if I don't take care of my family myself, I won't be able to take care of my work and my patients. So no, I wasn't always this consistent. So when I finally took a break, I was away for a week. I went to Curacao. I read this book called Atomic Habits. You know that one, yeah, by James Clear. And something hit, and I said to myself, I used to be the kind of person that if I wanted to do something, I had to be like, if I'm going to go exercise, it has to be for 30 minutes, and I need to, make sure I get these kilometers done, and I need to do it in this time. And what that book taught me was no, yeah, your goal is finally to do that one day, but you can start small. So, what I would do, no matter how tired I was in the day, when I would come back from work, one atomic habit that I changed is that I left work every day at 5. I
Mhm.
was like, the work ends at 5, everybody's out, I'm also out. So that I was home by 6 o'clock, and I made sure I ate something. And it didn't matter how late it was at night, I would do a workout, whether it was doing 10 push ups or walking on my treadmill for 4 minutes, it didn't matter. I just did something. And those tiny changes made it into my life in such a way that now when I'm working out, I'm doing, real good strength workouts. I'm exercising for 15 minutes consistently, and I'm feeling really good about what I've done, no matter how small. So that's really how we are where we are now.
Well, that's a beautiful story of recalibration, Sabine.
Yes.
And, James Clear talks about the smallest dose, doesn't he? What's the smallest dose that you can start with? One push up, but it's
Yes.
about establishing the routine.
Yes.
And so now you're telling us that you're over a year on and you've got this really embedded routine. It's awesome.
Yeah, I even post my fails on social media, like my history. I
You're
usually
taking vulnerability to a whole new level.
I like doing that because I want to also promote strength training for women who are like around my age.
Mm,
Because as a medical doctor, we have access to quite a lot of information. And I feel part of our job is to disperse that information in a way that makes sense to other people. And
mm,
I know that as I'm turning, I'll be 48, I think. Yeah, 48 this year. I want to let other women know that right now is the time to really think about your health, maybe in a different way. A lot of it has to do with nutrition, sleep, but strength training, absolutely. And more so because we've got all these new drugs in the market for weight loss, we need to make sure that we take care of our muscle health. So this is also the reason why I'm promoting this, and I'm kind of showing my vulnerability online to let women know you don't have to be this perfect, athlete and have this amazing body. As long as you get some weight and you use it to strengthen your core, it's going to help you in the long term.
It's the consistency, I think, that you're pointing to. I went back to the
Yes,
gym in July last year too, and the consistency,
nice.
that regular habit. It's really, I think we do well with routines. We don't want to be so rigid that we can't adapt to life, but having some routine is a great support for
Yes,
our well-being. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
But
absolutely.
let's go back, Sabine, to kind of maybe not the very beginning, but let's go back to your early years. What was happening then? Did you come from a medical family? How did you find yourself in medicine from your childhood, from your family of origin?
I don't come from a medical family at all. My earliest memories of how I even started thinking about medicine was, there comes a time when you have that conversation with your parents, right? And I'm having this now with my daughter. She's 14, so we're already thinking about, okay, what does she like? What would she like to do? We haven't yet gotten there, but I was around her age, and when, I was having a conversation with my mom, and she's like, okay, what do you want to do? And I literally looked at her and I said, oh, I want to be like Whoopi Goldberg. And because I was always known as the class clown, I was always making people happy and joking around. And I don't think my mom liked that at all. Uh, so she looked at me, she's like, excuse me. I said, she's like, no, I mean, like, what are you going to do as a career? Like, how are you going to make money and live? And I was like, yeah, but Whoopi Goldberg makes money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't, like link with my mom. So she left it at that. She's like, we'll have this conversation later. So a while later, we sat down again. And she, at that time, I don't think she even asked me what I want to do. She just basically gave me a few options. She's like, you're going to be either a lawyer, a dentist, I think she said an astronaut, I think, maybe I added that in, or a doctor. And we went back and forth, and I was just like, well, I don't want to be any of these. And again, nothing against how parents raise their children, but I think for me, the fundamental thing that I learned with that is that because we kept on going back and forth, I actually remember asking her, okay, if I become a doctor, can I work anywhere in the world? Because at that age, I really wanted to travel. For me, discovering the world was something that was also very important. And she said, yes, of course. And that clicked for me. So I
Mm,
decided, I compromised with my mom. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor, but then at least I get to travel. And that's how I ended up studying to becoming a doctor.
mm. And now, are you happy with the decision?
Yes and no. And I'm very honest about that. I think the we need to also be aware how, we're talking about 20 years ago when I actually graduated, and it took another 6 years for me to graduate. So 26 and then 4. So we're looking at probably 30 years ago from the moment that I made that decision to now. So much has changed. It's insane. So much has changed. Yes, because having done medicine, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about people. It's probably one of the only profession where your emotion are fluctuating up and down, and you have to always be steady, focused. So you're challenged a lot. So it's one of those professions where you need to, have a good ground in your core to be able to undertake all these different facets, the personalities, the diseases, the insecurities, the questions. And I went from medical school, graduated, went straight into knee emergency medicine, and then later on I did family medicine. So I've seen quite a lot of things. So yes, I my decision to become a doctor, I'm very happy with it because it has given me so many experiences. I've seen so many things. I've helped a lot of people, No, in the sense that the system has not unfortunately changed in a way to allow, let's say, people who want to get into this profession to discover their other skills, their other abilities, what they can do next to be a doctor. I feel once you have the title doctor, everybody just dumps that and says, okay, you're the doctor, you know everything. That's it. You cannot do anything else. And me, I'm like, but I like to discover things.
Mm.
And it doesn't allow you to do that. So those are the challenges I face. But now in my later years, and now that I have my own practice, I'm thinking, well, now's my time to actually develop those skills and make my own path. And I'm very excited about this future, especially now with the tools that we have.
Does having your own practice give you a bit more autonomy, give you a bit more flexibility in those decisions?
Absolutely. Definitely 100%, I would say, because having your own practice, well, it's your practice.
Mhm.
Obviously, there are guidelines that you have to follow, but within those guidelines, I am able to do so many things with my team, and which I wouldn't be able to do if I was working, for example, in the clinical setting in a hospital, which I've worked in before for many years. Like I said, I used to work in A&E for many years. And yes, it's fun to work in that setting, but you have less autonomy. And that was what happened when we met around COVID time. I'd come from a very demanding workload as an emergency medicine doctor. There was COVID, I had burned out, and I was trying to find my path again. And I knew I can no longer go back to what I had gone through. So I needed to find something else. I went through a coaching session, a few coaching sessions actually, and I was so happy that I found this lady who helped me understand that part of who I am is that discovery. I love discovering things. I'm an entrepreneur. And we looked at all the different fields of medicine, and family medicine actually fit me at that moment because I could own my practice, and because I had such a diverse experience. It really helped me define, okay, for the next phase of my life, this is
Mm.
what I want to bring forward and continue. Yeah.
Mm. So just before we go into all of that, because I know that's where the exciting parts are,
Yeah.
but can we just explore a bit more of the recalibrating that you've done? When you were first working in A&E, was that in the NHS in the UK or where were you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So can you share a little bit with us about these changes across the different countries and what your experience was as a doctor as you were adapting, I suppose, to each of these different systems that you were working in? What
Mm.
did you learn either about medicine at that global kind of level or even about yourself as you were adapting from one place to the next?
I'm going to go kind of back and forth simply because it was a while ago. And a lot of things I'm going through now is because I see young doctors who are coming to the Netherlands and they speak a second language,
Mm.
right? So or Dutch is not their primary language. But let me just start. When I graduated, I actually graduated in the Netherlands. So I learned the Dutch system. But I was raised in the Netherlands as an expat because we came with my parents when I was young. And before that time, I was raised in England, but I was born in Cameroon. So,
Mhm.
so there's a whole
You've
journey
been a
there.
global citizen your whole life.
Right. And so even though I graduated here in the Netherlands in the Dutch system, I wasn't really integrated in the Dutch culture. Most of my friends and my identity was a lot more within the expat community, meaning that by the time I graduated and I got into the work life in the Netherlands, I really struggled to fit in. And I didn't get into the clinical setting immediately. I actually did research for a year and a half, and I thought this is not for me. I want to go back to England because I really missed England. So I literally got on a plane and I moved to London, and I felt welcome here. I'm like, this is where I belong because it was in English. I think in English. My community is English speaking. So settling in the UK was for me the best decision. I got into the NHS, and then I was hit with, wow, this is really clinical life. It was intense. It was chaotic. It was it was insane. I thought to myself, there's actually no, well, I was just basically, yeah, oh, you're a doctor, come and work in this department and you're on your own. And it was very different than in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, it's like, okay, you're new here, but you're gonna have somebody to that you have to report to. This a very hierarchical system in the Netherlands. Also, you can't make decisions even though you graduated, you're not the final decision maker. And what I found in the NHS was, because it's so big and there's just such a huge need in doctors, you could just get in there and all of a sudden you had a whole department and you were in charge. I was overwhelmed because I was like, I've never done this before. So those are the challenges I face. Anyway, I got through that, went further, got some extra courses, read a lot of books, obviously, because I really wanted to make it work. And then I got into A&E and I thought, yeah, this is really what I like. And what happened was that as I was, going through my experience, one of the things that helped me recalibrate was, again, finding what I liked within that very intense workload. No matter how difficult it was, I always had to, one of the things I said, but can I sustain this for another year? Can I sustain, do I see myself doing this for another year, another 2 years? And if the answer was yes, I just continued, because for me, there was no reason at that time to jump ship and go somewhere else. And like you mentioned, doctors typically, when you choose a path, that's where you stay. And England was very different than the Netherlands, like I said, was because England, like, it's just so big and everybody comes in A&E. And I was subjected to so many different conditions, and I was allowed to do things, and I was like, wow, I can actually make decisions. So I felt really confident about myself. So by the time I came back to the Netherlands and I wanted to go back into the A&E setting, here it's like, no, you can't make those decisions, because A&E in the Netherlands at the time was not a specialization on its own. So even if you work in the A&E department, so somebody coming in with chest pain, you as a medical doctor had to first call the cardiologist. And the cardiologist would say, oh no, don't talk to me. You have to talk to my junior cardiologist. And then one day, I'll never forget, when I was in the Netherlands working in A&E, I had done a lot of experience in England, NHS. So I'm here trying to find my bearings again. And I called somebody, an orthopedic surgeon, and he literally said, no, call my junior. And I called the junior, and the junior said, no, you have to call the intern. And I lost it. I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't even want to call any of you because I know what I need to do. Right. And you want me now to call the intern and discuss with the intern what to do with this patient. And that was me. That was when I said, I can't do this. You're coming from a position where you make decisions, and now you're in the Netherlands, and the rules are so strict. You have no autonomy in certain things. So that's when I realized the clinical setting in the hospital is no longer for me. And like I said earlier, I went through this whole coaching session to find out what really did work for me.
Mm. When you're thinking back, Sabine, on these sections, I suppose, in the UK, in London, and the hospital work in the Netherlands, and now in your own clinic in primary care, what helped you? What were the resources or the insights that you had that helped you make each of those shifts? So one of them is, you talked about the coach having a sounding board, but what else
Yeah.
helped?
I think the main thing that helped me make this shift to where I am now is my daughter. Like, she was growing up, and I remembered every time there was not a year when I was doing A&E that I didn't ever have to work in during holiday seasons, right? Christmas, New Year, Easter, every holiday season that had a shift. And then you had to combine it with night shifts. And then you had to combine it with missing out on a lot of social gatherings. I had missed my friends' weddings. There was one time that, unfortunately, one of my very dear friends had passed away. And of course, I really wanted to be at her funeral to say goodbye. And the struggle it took for me to take those time off just to be able to attend her funeral. And I said to myself, this is not okay. This is not how I want to continue. And not seeing my daughter all, growing up, because I had night shifts. I had to find a babysitter. I had to make sure that she was somewhere else whilst I was working. It was just too much disruption for me. And there came a point in my life where I needed to focus on her and being there with her. Even though she's going to school now, she's in secondary school, I want to be able to work on the times when she's at school. So when she's finished from school, I'm home. And that was for me important. And when there's weekends, we are together in the weekends. And I needed to decide more for myself. Am I going to do those weekend shifts? Yes or no? And the answer was no, because now I have other priorities.
Mm. I love the integration that you're pointing us to, Sabine, that you're not somehow two separate selves, that when you're at work, you still have a daughter and an outside life. And when you're at home,
Yes,
you still have a medical working life. These things are
yes,
integrated. They're not completely compartmentalized in a way that I think doctors, and probably women doctors, have been asked to do in the past. That we're really pushing back on that now because
yeah.
well, it doesn't actually make any sense in the modern world.
No, it doesn't. With all due respect, we want women who are perfect everything. You have to have if you have a career, great. But some others say, oh, but why'd you have a career? If you have kids and a career, oh, how can you do that? But you should have a kids and a career. It's this very, you know, balance, finding this balance where you're thinking to yourself, but what about me? What do I want? And this is where I come back to the system. The system does not, unfortunately, allow people in many healthcare professions to explore those desires, those skills, those ambitions. And I think it's a wasted opportunity, because you might be at this stage now, or for me, where I'm thinking, well, I have my practice. Within my practice, I want to be more innovative. And I'll give you an example. About 4 months ago, December of last year, so 2025, I reached a point where I was like, I understand these signals. My body was giving me signals, and I'm like, okay, I recognize these signals as burnout. And I wasn't sleeping very well. I was extremely frustrated about a lot of things. And I took 2 weeks off. And I just told my manager, I have to take these weeks off. I can't do this anymore. So I went 1 week by myself away. And then the second week, it was around Christmas, where I took my daughter and we went to Portugal. And I remember coming back and I said, okay, Sabine, something has to change. And what had to change was that I was, from Mondays to Friday, I was just seeing patients,
Mm.
only seeing patients. My agenda was completely full with patient care. Not a problem because I'm a doctor. But what I was struggling with, and this is where again my TED talk comes in, I was losing the joy because I was miserable just only seeing patients. I wasn't exploring all the other things that I liked within my practice. I was missing out on actually taking care of my practice because my practice is a business. I needed to take care of the finances. I had totally lost sight of my financial situation. I had totally lost sight of my personnel. I totally lost sight on the processes that make the practice work. All I was doing was taking care of patients with knee pain, ear pain, a little bit of like fever. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Yes, they want to see me, but are they coming to see me because they really have something that only me, can take care of? Or can they see another colleague? And I made a shift. And I remember telling my manager, we have to change this because I cannot continue like this. I recognize the signs. And if this moves forward, I'm closing the doors and I'm doing something else because this is not okay. And she's like, okay, what do you need? I said, I need you to block my agenda so that I can recalibrate, right? I can get back to myself and I can go back and understand my finances in my practice because there's so many things going on that I just get letters from my accountant left and right and this and I didn't understand anything. I have to understand the processes. We have to take care of chronic care. We have to take care of patients who are palliative, and nobody was doing that properly.
Mm.
So we wrote a letter to all my patients, the 3,000 plus, and we said to them, Dr. Fonderson is now going to take a step back, and there will always be enough clinic availabilities to be seen because we have a team. And I'll never forget how the first 2 weeks that we did that, people literally were thinking that I had quit. They
Mm.
thought that I was no longer a doctor. I was getting, mails and telephones like, oh, Sabine, oh, I didn't know you were still around. That letter, I thought you left. I thought, you couldn't take it anymore. I said, but we know. All I said was that I'm taking a step back to take care of my practice. So it's very interesting how people understand my own desires because at that stage I needed to find time for myself again. And what I want to say with this story is that your body tells you enough. You need to listen to it and take action. Don't be scared. It was what I did was risky, but I have no regrets because I go back to work now feeling fabulous.
I call that self-leadership. I think that you showed some leadership for yourself, and
Yes.
actually the other people experienced that leadership too because they saw that you were able to pause and create something else. And that's important modeling for the other doctors,
Yeah,
for the reception team, and ultimately for the patients, that they're
I hope so.
another
Yeah.
way of reminding that that you're human.
And this is exactly what I say to them when they came to the clinic. Like, they would see me at the clinic. I'm always at the clinic. There's probably one day a week that I might not be there because I also want to take some time away from the clinic. But once they see me, they're like, "Oh, but you're here." I said, "Of course I'm here." And I said, "For the last 2 years, I've dedicated my time taking care of you. Now I need to take care of my practice." And I think, wording it like that, they do understand.
And you've mentioned your TED Talk, so let's go there.
Hmm.
And I do want to come back and ask you about Cameroon and the USA at some stage too.
Hmm.
But the TED Talk, I think, was really interesting. You were talking about the art of medicine, essentially, and we'll put the link
Yes.
in the show notes so the listeners can find it easily. But you're talking about the art of medicine, and that being a medical practitioner is a craft, and that it takes time to develop, and that it involves the art of medicine as much as anything else. Can you tell us a little bit about the messages that you hope to impart through your TED Talk?
Yes, if I look at my early days as, starting off as a doctor, once you get that diploma and then the moment there's that signature, you get your number. Every doctor always gets that number. In the Netherlands, it's the BIG. In England, it's the GMC. I have no idea what it is in Australia, I don't know what that is. But you get that number, and yes, now you can make decisions, and you're a doctor, right? What I remember the early days was, for me, it was all about patients coming in and making sure once I saw them, once they came with their conditions, I should be able to have a diagnosis and a plan. That was all you're taught, right? You, like, once somebody comes in and says this, you ask these questions. In your mind, you're already processing the information. You're kind of looking, remembering the textbooks that you saw them in, and you have an idea that this is it. It took years for me to realize that many times, because I had these conversations with patients, and I couldn't understand why. I thought I'm really good at diagnosing, right? I'm good at coming up with a plan. But patients would be like, "Oh, I went to see that doctor, and she didn't pay attention to me," or she completely missed, the whole reason why I came. And I would really struggle with, okay, did I not communicate properly? What did I miss? And the craft of medicine is literally getting people, and this is what I realized later on, when I realized that my job is not necessarily to give a diagnosis, obviously that will come, but my job is to make people feel heard. When I realized that that's what it is, this is what they need, I realized that, oh, then I can take my time, especially in primary care. This is what I tell a lot of my colleagues, especially the young ones, because I see them struggle, right? Because in their mind, they're like, oh, but I need to have a diagnosis, I need to have a plan, and then they need to get better. And now I tell them, listen, this is not A&E. This is not emergency medicine. There's hardly ever any blood that we'll see, right? There's hardly any broken bones that we're gonna see. So take your time. Your job at that point in time, for those 15 minutes that you have, is to make sure that you have made that patient feel heard. If you've accomplished that, you've done 90% of the work. You've done 90% of the diagnosis, and the plan is literally secondary. So that for me is one of the most important things I've learned, and that's a craft. It takes a long time, and you see that also with more mature doctors. You can see them also in the clinical setting where they're more relaxed, they're just more laid back, and then they say, "Okay, talk." And then sometimes what you hear, and this is what I also saw with more mature primary care physicians, is you would see the patients leaving the clinic room laughing and smiling, and they're just like best friends. And I'm thinking, how do they do that? And it's a craft. First of all, yes, you need to sometimes take time to know the patient, but particularly if they feel heard, they might come with you with knee pain. And then at the end of the day, if you only solve that knee pain and you forget the fact that actually she's also struggling with weight problems, she's not sleeping well, she has financial problems, she can't get that knee operation, and you're supposed to get all of that in 15 minutes, it's a craft.
It sounds like, I mean, you smiled so much at the beginning of this part of our conversation. It sounds
Yeah.
It's more fulfilling or it's more rewarding when you're able to practice in this way, when you're listening more attentively, when your goal is to help the patient feel heard.
Absolutely, especially in this setting. I'm not saying in a setting where somebody comes in with a broken arm and you're like, oh, so how was your weekend? Nobody, you have to, it's in the context, right? But when you have, when it's not acute, when it's not life threatening, I think that we need to make sure that we develop more that art of really listening to what the patient is saying before we jump to those diagnoses. And what I tell a lot of my colleagues, the junior doctors that are starting out and they want to understand what primary care is about, I always tell them, just take it easy, take your time. You have the time now to grow and learn. And many times I say, as long as you know that the patient has felt heard, you can tell them to go home, and you can say to them, I'll call you back at the end of the afternoon. I'm going to just discuss this with another colleague just to make sure that we get this right. I never want them to feel pressured to get the diagnosis right at the first go, or even have a fantastic plan, because that plan can go completely out of the window once the patient leaves and says, "Yeah, that doctor didn't listen to a thing I said." Right.
Mm,
And
mm,
this is sometimes what happens.
yeah.
You can have a patient, then you're like, "Oh, I got this." I even talked about it in my TED talk. This lady with the mascara, I was like, oh, that's the reason why your eye is red and blah blah blah. Technically, it was the reason, but she felt completely unheard, and for a whole year she avoided coming to me. And I thought this is a missed opportunity. So I really wanted to highlight that story and make sure people understand. Make sure your only goal at that time is to, did that patient felt heard? And it's okay to ask, did I cover everything? Have we gone through all the things that you wanted to talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, that pressure creates all sorts of problems, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
research says that doctors, depending which year you look, that doctors interrupt within up to as quickly as 11 seconds when the patient comes into the room because of that pressure, that idea that I've only got 10 minutes, I've only got 15 minutes, I've got to find everything out. And exactly as you said, the patient is much more likely to tell you all the stuff if you give them a little bit of room, 1, 2 minutes to talk and tell you at the outset to feel heard. Mm.
Exactly. And one of my AI tools does that because it transcribes. And I remember putting that AI tool into another AI tool and looking at how many percentage of the time am I talking and what is the percentage of the time that my patient is talking. And I was so happy when I realized that 80% of the time my patient is talking. I was like, yes, this is
Awesome.
great, you know?
Awesome. Well
Yeah.
done.
And this is what we need to understand, is that yes, there's a pressure to do things quickly, and most times I'm always running behind because I want to give space to my patients. And I sometimes say, okay, you know what? It seems like you really want to discuss things. I do have other patients. You can come back tomorrow. We can make a new appointment. But I feel like this time is the time for us to discuss all of that. And I'll come back to certain things later on. I can send you an email. I can call you. I want doctors to realize that there are so many more tools out there now to get your message across. You don't need to, at that moment, tell them a whole bunch of things about how dangerous it is, to take that medication. Yes, obviously you can highlight, side effects, but you can do that later on and say, look, I'm running behind. We're going to start this treatment. I'm going to send you some information at home to take your time to read. And then if you have any questions, get back to me. We need to be more versatile and flexible when it comes to our patients' interaction.
Before we get into the AI stuff, can you tell us a little bit about what happened in Cameroon and in the USA? What work have you done in those places?
In Cameroon, when I graduated, in my last 2 years of medical school, I actually took another course and I did small business management. I think from young, I knew that I was an entrepreneur. Like I wanted to do something with business because my dad, he's an entrepreneur. He always had his side hustles, even though he worked in big organizations. And I remember I told you I really wanted to travel. My dad used to travel all the time. That's what we did as expats. So that was already part in me. When I was in my last 2 years of medical school, I saw a program and I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm going to learn about, starting a small business. When I finished that course, I had an idea, and by that time, I was going to Cameroon with my family on holidays. So imagine I was born in Cameroon. I don't have any memories of being raised there because I left when I was about 3 or 4 and we went to England. I don't have much memories of Cameroon itself, but we used to go back on holidays, right? And then when I was about 19, I was like, oh, I really want to find my roots. I want to discover where I'm from. So I went back to Cameroon and I was supposed to stay there for, I think, 8 weeks. And I combined it with like an internship where I went into the middle of nowhere. I found this amazing, well, it was actually through a colleague of mine I was working with. And she said, oh, we have a project in this hospital in Banga Bakundu. I was like, where is that? How is it that Dutch doctors know more about Cameroon than I do? So I traveled, I asked them, can I come with you guys the next time? So they said yes. And I incorporated that with one of my final school interns. When you do medicine, you have to do like an extended internship. So I combined it with that, and it was amazing. I had the time of my life. I got sick so many times. I developed typhoid fever, but I was like, I am happy here, And it gave me something back where I said, I don't know Cameroon, but I want to know it, but I want to do something, give something back. So I started projects myself. And having finished that course on small business management, I started a company called A Student's Help in Africa, because at that time I was a student, and it made me go back to Cameroon, I think about 4 times a year. And I started a project where I would help other students from other countries go to Cameroon and do their internships. So that's what it did. And I was developing my own websites. I was, doing my own promotion. I mean, this thing took all my time and I loved every single second of it. So, my first ever student was a young student called Mary from the United States. She left the United States to fly all the way to Cameroon. I'm like, okay, you really, you're doing something that even I myself haven't done. And I got everything arranged for her. She had an internship in a city called Bamenda. I had, because what I did, I built contacts in different places in Cameroon, and I talked to doctors, and the doctors were like, great, we can host these students. So they would pay us a fee. I would give that fee to the host families, and then they would spend a few weeks in the hospitals, and they would live there as, as part of the community. And she was my first student, and then after that it just blew. And the following year I had 2 students from the Netherlands. They came back, they talked about it. A year later I had like 40 students. Long story short, I sent over 250 students to Cameroon, right?
Wow.
And it was a huge project, and I would host workshops, and I would teach them how to do venipunctures. I would teach them how to do sutures, so that whilst they're there they can also feel handy. We had projects where we would be sending computers, we were sending school equipment. It was really like one of the best things that I've ever done.
A passion
And
project.
it was one of the best passion projects. And my aunt, she took a lot of the burden also over, because she's like, oh, I can help you with this. So I was doing this with my aunt, and we grew and grew and grew until when I gave birth to my daughter in 2012. I had delivered my daughter, and a few hours later I got the news that my aunt passed away.
Oh,
So that completely disrupted my life. I was like, what? How can that happen? And because my aunt wasn't there anymore, yeah, the project just didn't have the same meaning that it did. And with a lot of pain, 3 years later, I had to stop it.
it must have had impact in so many different directions. It must have had impact for those communities where the students were
Yeah,
coming to work. It must have had impact on those actual students themselves individually. They've gone back to wherever they came from and talked about Cameroon and their experiences
yeah,
in Africa.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
ripples upon ripples, Sabine. It must be very satisfying. Even though there's a sadness in you for it to have had to close up, it must be a very
Mm.
satisfying part of your history to reflect on this.
It was by far one of the again, it was my first project right after finishing that course. And I was like, this is it. This is all I want to do. And but obviously I couldn't make money out of it. I wasn't
The
I
love
wasn't
project.
able to pay. It
Yeah.
was a love project. I couldn't pay my bills from it. And I remember my mom telling me it's a project, Sabine. I was like, yeah, but I really like this project. But yeah, it's to me, it's one of the most satisfying things I've done. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
what a gift. I just think that the lessons that people were learning in that time
Yeah,
have stayed with them their whole life, I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, yeah. And we try to replicate the same concept. A few years ago, I started it again. I was like, oh, I really want a passion project again. And then I called it, I named it Tiba. And I had contacts in Kenya. And I sent about 6 students, I think, in total. But it wasn't there, it's just not the same. And I can't go through with something if I myself am not 100% behind it.
Yeah.
Although the host family in Kenya, they were amazing. Um, I have never been there. So I'm
Mm.
relying on
Yeah.
third party to tell
Yeah.
me how it is. But Cameroon, I had been to every single place. So when I sent a student there, I would tell them from my own view so that
Mm.
I made them realize that no, this is what you're going to see. I took photos. I was literally, a travel agency, but promoting Cameroon in one of the best ways. And I even used to travel with some students so that I could be part of that. And I would make sure that they settled, and then I would leave and go and visit other family members.
I don't know anything about medicine in Africa, or certainly not in
Yeah.
Cameroon. Is there something you can share with us about that in terms of, thinking about systems and healthcare systems? One of the things that I notice is it doesn't matter what system you're in, there are systems problems. So even though
Yes.
systems are different, for individual clinicians and for patients, there are problems. It's part of, in some ways, it's part of just big systems, unwieldy
Yeah.
big systems. You were talking about the Jess earlier on. What's something that we can learn or reflect on, or that we might be curious about in Cameroon's health system?
Well, you have two main systems. You have the public health and private healthcare. Public healthcare, unfortunately, in most regions of Cameroon, it's terrible. What I've seen is there's no words to describe. I think it's people should go themselves and experience that, because when you go to a hospital in a rural setting, parents bring a child, and that child literally has minutes to live because they've waited so long, because they don't have the money or they've traveled so long. And you see young kids die in front of you because the facilities are not there, parents don't have the money. I mean, it's it doesn't make sense, especially coming from a system here
Mm.
where, with all due respect, parents bring their child with a small runny nose and they're already like, oh no, my kid can't breathe. And so I have difficulty sometimes. And there are times when I tell patients and I say, look, you are living in a system in the Netherlands. And I say to them, I would like you to understand something. I've worked in many different settings, and you can complain all you want about how we give care in the Netherlands. But let me say that the Netherlands is by far one of the best healthcare systems there is, because you have accessibility,
Mm.
right? You have a phone call. I'm a phone call away. I'm 10 minutes away. There is, at any time in your life, whatever help you need, if you have a little cough or a headache, you have accessibility. You can find somebody to help you. You travel 8 hours to another continent, and that accessibility is gone. It means that you don't have life anymore because you can't get that help. And I try and put that into perspective, not to scare them, but just to make them understand perspective. And one of the things I say is that no matter how sick you are, sometimes when you're sick, you might be sick for 2 days. In 2 days, I don't know what you have. Sometimes you have to let your body figure it out. Right? You just have to just be sick for a couple of days, and we'll figure it out. I don't need to diagnose you now, because I'm actually just treating a symptom. I want to treat a condition. And in a setting like Cameroon, you see people survive things for so long, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, your body is able to take care of a lot. So the contrast is so huge to me sometimes when you look at Cameroon, and again, you have private care, you have public care, and even in private care, you might have better facilities, but it doesn't mean that they're going to save your lives. I know people who've gone to a private clinic and they still unfortunately passed away because at that time there was just no, there was just no medication still. Or even though they had the money, maybe the machine wasn't working, so they couldn't get the scan they needed. It's
Mm.
crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I think it's easy for us in the Western countries to lose our perspective in that way. Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And these are things that maybe I might ethically, I might not be allowed to think like this, but I try to bring it in certain conversations just to have people put things into context. Just as I believe that they want to have the feeling that they're heard, I think that they should also understand that from the medical perspective, we're not here to resolve every single little issue. That's just impossible.
Yeah.
So I use that a lot. Yeah.
Mm. And having said that, though, you have worked hard, I think, to help the expats who live in the Netherlands have access
Yeah.
and understand. So maybe it's a good time to hear about that, this reality. I had a nephew that lived in the Netherlands for 12 months, actually, not so long ago. I was thinking about him as we were coming together. These young people from Australia used to, and New Zealand, I think, London was the place they went for a long, long time. That's where I went when I was a young person, and that was our base. But with the changes in the world, a lot of people are coming to the Netherlands now as the sort of central European place to kick off from.
Yeah.
Tell us about your expat work.
One of the reasons why I started the Expat Health Clinic was because when I was in England, around the time that Facebook was happening, WhatsApp was around, I used to get people because they know me, and then they'd be like, "Oh, hey, doc, can you help me with this?" And because yeah, everybody is like, "You're a doctor, so you know everything, right?" So my Facebook messages and my WhatsApp messages would just explode because people will be traveling, and then they're like, "Oh, but I know Sabine, she's a doctor, so she can help me, right?" And I would tell them, yeah, I know you, but I can't help you. I mean, that's not how this works. And I'm very, very strict about, friends and family asking me for medical advice because I'm like, that doesn't match very well. But my number used to get spread around and I would get people, just asking me questions. And I thought, oh, let me put a platform out there. Let me just, answer these questions because a lot of people are facing these cultural differences, right? Just like I mentioned, when you leave from the Netherlands and you go to Cameroon, you're going to be, you're going to have a culture shock because things are so different. It's the same thing as you might be leaving from Cameroon or from the United States or from where Australia and coming to the Netherlands. It's still a culture
Yeah.
shock because the healthcare system is different. Anything that's different is going to be a shock to your system. So, and what I found fascinating is people coming in with their context, right? With their perspective. So a lot of my patients that I get, my expats, they're coming from countries like America, and they will come to me and say, "Yeah, well, I have a headache and I want to go to a neurologist." And I say, "Well, in the Netherlands, we have this thing called primary care, where first a GP like me will assess whether or not I think you need to go to a neurologist because we are the filter. Otherwise, hospitals would be completely full, and there are not enough doctors to work in these hospitals, and that's not how it works." And I try to let them understand that whole process because one of the things is that they get frustrated. In many other countries, once you're sick, you get diagnostics, right? Blood tests done, scans, because we want to know exactly what you have, or we want to rule out all these other pathologies. And I'm thinking in those countries, there might be a monetary incentive, but in the Netherlands, that's not how it works. There's just this primary care system, and we filter things out and we make sure that you're stable. And if we can't figure it out, okay, then you go to a specialist, right? And getting my patients, the expats, to understand that is really, really interesting. And many times when I say, right now, I know you're worried about, let's say, the headache. I've heard everything you said. I've done my examination. I don't need to send you right now to a neurologist because of these reasons. And they're like, oh, okay, I understand that now. And this is what I like doing, explaining the context and getting them out of that perspective and making them understand how it works in the Netherlands. Because I'm sure that by the time they leave the Netherlands and they go off to another country, it will be a completely different perspective there too. But at least here they understand how it works.
Let's talk about the AI tools and the workflow tools that you're using. That's a bit of your entrepreneurial spirit as well, but it's all
Yes.
come out of your own frustration, hasn't it, in terms of the administrative burden and the work that's involved in this filtering and assessing and all the differential work that you're doing as that front line in primary care.
The AI tools have come because I love everything that has to do with digital technology and gadgets. As a young kid, my dad, like I said, my dad used to travel all the time. And when he came back home, he had like the latest Walkman, and then it was the latest CD player. And every time he had something and it was like a year old, he would give it to me. So I always had new gadgets.
Okay.
Um, for me, AI, now that we've always had technology, right? That's never changed. It's only becoming more advanced. And now we have this thing called artificial intelligence. And the way I see it is that it helps me do things a little bit faster. It helps me do things a little bit more efficient. And the way I explain it to my team or to anybody is I say, AI has helped me get all these data, which is quite unstructured, into more structured data that I can do something with.
Mhm.
Okay. And the tools has helped me then tell my patients, okay, I now have the possibility to look at 20 years of your data. It would take me maybe 4 months to go through all of it and make sense of it. But now it takes me a few minutes.
Mm.
What would you like? Would you rather that I do that for you so that I can really find out what's going on? Because 20 years of data can really help us understand you better. Or I just basically, upon reflex, just treat you. Every time you come in with something, okay, we treat that. And I want us to use AI to do that more.
Mm.
Let's look at all that data and make it more structured to be able to make predictions regarding that one patient.
Mm. So you're really talking about personalized medicine. How are the
Yes.
people around you responding? Are the patients and your colleagues, are they agreeing with you or are they scared? What's happening?
It's a mix. It's a mix. I can tell you honestly, in my practice, I've had team members leave and they say they don't see themselves in that vision uh, because it is a vision that I have and I want to implement. So they've left. So I've had team members leave because they don't see themselves in that vision.
Yeah.
I've had team members say, wow, this is great. Finally, we can actually use tools to, for example, send out questionnaires to patients. I'll give you an example. In the Netherlands, if you are in a chronic care condition, for example, heart disease, COPD, asthma, diabetes, you are part of a chronic care pathway. And we get subsidized by the government to take care of you. And it means that we call you up once every 4 or 5 months to see how you're doing. And we've realized that there are certain questionnaires that we can send to you at home and you fill it out. One of the criteria for getting that government funding is if we comply with certain data, because they want that data to be able to make sure that we're doing our job. So imagine the workload that we can take off a practice by using just an easy tool like a Microsoft form that a patient can fill out by themselves at home and send it to us. And we now have the data that we can insert into these care pathways. And we've done already 40% of that work. But what happened in the past is that you will have to block a whole 30-minute slot and have the patient come to you. And I'm thinking, how efficient is that, right? Because that 30-minute slot doesn't change anything because you're still going to get the funding, but you're really taking away time from other patients who might need you.
Mm.
So we're implementing all these different tools now, and we are actually, instead of being more narrow in our workflows, we're now broadening our workflows because we get the data earlier on. Patients are responding. We can ask them other questions. We can do a lot more with that data than having to wait 6 months, right? And then 6 months later, they come down, sit down, and in that 15 minutes or 20-minute slot, you have to do so much more work and they forget things, right? People forget things all the time. So you're not capturing the information that you should have captured 6 months ago. You're capturing information that they just remembered a week ago. So we're doing a lot more with information to make sure that we really help patients. So we've got a mix of responses. The majority of my peers, they think I'm completely cuckoo, right? They're like, what? What are you doing? No, because to be honest, general practitioners and most doctors are very conservative
Mm.
and they don't like change. Like, don't tell them to change their processes. We've been doing this for 25 years. That's how it works. We're not changing. And I say to them, good luck to you, because it's not even because I'm doing it, but this is what the government is actually expecting from us to do. There's a huge shift. The government is wanting changes. They're wanting innovation. There's a lot of funding, a lot of, focus on innovative healthcare. So I say to them, you might as well admit that this is the way forward. Don't, yeah, don't deny this. And I'm just
Yeah.
happy that I always wanted to do this, so it comes very natural to me.
Yeah, so you're an early adopter by the sound of it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's exciting to you. I can see the energy in you as you're talking about it.
I took a course a year ago. I literally locked myself for a whole weekend from Friday to Sunday. I told my daughter, you are spending time with your dad. It was a full on weekend on everything about AI. And my mind was blown. I just thought, we are so behind. Okay. It's a very
Yeah.
fast movement. Yeah.
I think we're in that delicate time of making sure that we're using the tools, not becoming the tool, and so that's the
Absolutely.
that's the education that we need all of us to give ourselves and give each other. Your example is really reminding us that there is still choice, that there will still be moments where you're saying, I really need to see this patient, or where the patient is saying, I really want to see the doctor. And then there are other times where there can be these streamlined workflow things. And change is hard for people. Actually, change, the going forward is not so hard because we like novelty. We're usually excited about novelty. It's the letting go of the familiar and the predictable and the routine that's hard for humans. So keep up your good work with negotiating with your colleagues.
And I just want to say something about letting go. I've never said to them, let go of your routine. I
Yeah.
want them, because familiarity is good. I'm
Mm.
saying take that familiarity and then now add on to what this tool can do to make this, what's familiar to you, be more efficient. Just one small example. I have a colleague of mine, unfortunately, she had a shoulder injury and she's trying to get back to work again. And her task is to go and visit patients, mostly in their homes, especially vulnerable elderly patients. We spoke the other day, and she said, Sabine, I'm really struggling with my energy. When I get home, I'm exhausted. I'm like, what's making you exhausted? She's like, well, I see all these patients, and I come home and I have to type it all down in the patient notes, and my shoulder is really hurting me, and it just, drains my energy. I said, but I have a tool, right? I have a tool that you can use whilst you're there. You can ask information. Can I transcribe it? Can I record this? Just and then you just upload it in this tool. It makes a beautiful summary, and then I'm not telling you to just copy everything blindly. Read through it and make the changes that you need. But it helps you remove all that pressure to come home and type all these things out, because that's a lot of energy. And she was like, oh, thank you so much. That will help me a lot.
Mm.
So she's not, I'm not asking her to change her routine. I'm just asking her to look at what works for her and how we can preserve her energy so that she doesn't get drained. The last thing I want is for her to leave.
Yeah, well, it's that running an experiment, isn't it? It's being willing to test and trial.
Yes.
And a
Yeah.
very important point that I want to just amplify that there is some evidence that doctors do become complacent with some of the scribing tools. And so I really like that you reiterated that, still read the notes, still make the changes. Ultimately, you're still responsible for the notes. So
Yeah.
that's this idea again of using the tool to support and help you, but not giving over your responsibility to the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something, just because I really like the way you said it. I build the tool myself. So it's not something that I bought. I build the tool. And I made the tool purposely. And this is a true story. I made a tool that it does not discern whether or not it's a male or female.
Mhm.
So when it gives you the summary, it's always by default male. So you have to actually read the summary and change things. So I'm pushing you to make sure that, because you can have a female that you saw, but the summary will be default male. So you have to go in there and make some changes. So this
Mm.
is one of the things I did on purpose. Yeah.
All right, I'm really conscious of our time. We've had such a lovely
No, it's okay.
of
Yeah.
time together. Is there anything that while we've been talking that, has come to mind that you want to reflect on or point to or, emphasize maybe for our younger doctors or for our listeners who are feeling nervous about AI, or our doctors who are feeling like, oh, I can't have all this variety in my life? The thing that's really obvious talking to you is the variety, that you're honoring your desire for variety in your life. Anything you want to put a pin in before we finish?
Well, I want to take a moment to thank you, Sharee, because when I reached out to you back then, I was really struggling with where my path and my career was going. And I remember reading your book, and I remember thinking to myself, it's okay to seek help. And I want to reiterate the fact that just because we're doctors, we are humans and we suffer. And a lot of doctors suffer in silence. And I think this is one of the things that, again, the system has done completely wrong by not allowing a space for vulnerability, by not allowing an open space for talking about vulnerability, mistakes, anxiety, frustrations, anger, because we deal with so many emotions from other people and they expect us to just take it all in. Okay, we're the filter, right? I have to take your emotion today because you're just angry because you had to wait 25 minutes before you got to talk to me. I have to take your emotion because you're angry because I didn't prescribe a medication. There's a lot going on and the system has to change. But sometimes the system isn't ready for that change because it likes the status quo, right? But I want to reiterate that as doctors, please remember that you are humans first. And your body is telling you every day what's wrong and what's right. And your coaching, what you're doing, that recalibration is helping us understand how to connect with those internal signals. And sometimes external signals are also being brought up by people around you. I've had my father say to me, Sabine, are you okay? When I talk to you, you sound really exhausted. Make sure you rest. Your partners are telling you things. Your children, my kid told me, remember, Mom, you're really negative about work nowadays. Maybe you should think about your mental health. Those signals are real. So what you're doing is amazing. So I really want to highlight that doctors, people, health professions, please, you are human, vulnerable. And I say to my team, I always say to them, I want you to put yourself first before a patient. And I do this on purpose. I say, because if you're not good, you cannot treat a patient. And this is an anecdote. Everybody's like, oh, everybody says that, but it's the truth. And that's why I'm no longer ashamed to tell my patients, hey, look, today I'm really tired. I can't take care of you. But good, look, my colleague is more than happy to take care of you. And it's okay to do that because the worst thing that can happen is that you push yourself and do things that your body is telling you, I'm exhausted, I can't anymore. But you do it because society says, the system says, and then you make a mistake, you make a blunder. And then what?
Yeah.
We need to have open dialogues. That's why I talk about many different things, but I highlight you have to put yourself first, period. And I even said the other day, I was having a conversation with my accountant about, like I told you, I'm now really getting into my business side of my practice, the financial health of it, because everything has a health factor. A business has a financial health, a business has a process health. You got to look at it, things like these in these systems. We were going back and forth about something, and I remember saying to him, because I put my daughter came in my mind, and he said, oh, well, you're spending a lot of money in hiring, personnel, because I have a big team. And if you look at it for the number of patients I have, it doesn't make any sense. And I said, no, I do that on purpose because I want to make sure that I'm home with my child. I remember saying to him, this is non-negotiable, the
Yeah.
things that I do for my kid and for her and me and for us is non-negotiable. And I challenge doctors to start using words like this. This is non-negotiable time. When my shift is ending, because that's what I have on my contract, non-negotiable, I'm out. Dare to say that. Okay. That's really one of the fundamental things I want people to understand, because the system is there to make us work beyond our limits. But sometimes that limit has to be non-negotiable. Yeah.
That is a beautiful place to finish. I hope that every listener has really heard that last bit. Non-negotiable. I'm out. The time is up.
Yeah.
I'm finished. I've got some other life to live now. That
Absolutely.
makes me a better doctor, actually, when I go off and do my other life. So
Yes.
thank
Yeah.
you so much, Sabine, for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
A joy as I knew it would be to talk with you. I really look forward to when we get to release it out into the world. And we certainly will be pointing people to your TED Talk. I hope if you're listening today,
Thank you.
that you go and look up TED Talk, Sabine Fonderson, and really spend some time reflecting on what she shares in that TED Talk about the art of medicine, the craft of medicine, and the history of medicine. That we are sometimes caught up in what's going on in the moment, that we're operating in. Giving that historical context, I think, also has really helped me think a lot about those themes of the art of medicine. So thank you, Sabine. I look forward to talking with you down the track, maybe not so long in between talks.
I'm still coming to Australia, I promise. Yes.
Yes, well, there's one continent you haven't been to yet.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. Thank you.
awesome. Thanks, Sabine. I've got so many notes here from this conversation with Sabine that I'll need to refer to them to make this little wrap up. And wasn't it a powerful finish when she said, dare yourself to say, no, I'm out? And Sabine's story is really full of opportunities to recalibrate, and perhaps earlier in her career they weren't as conscious, but certainly in this part of her career, really conscious decisions where she's seeking feedback, she's having some coaching, she's noticing the signals from her body. I hope you also heard that message, that your body is giving you signals, and other people, your partners, your parents, your kids, are saying, are you okay? Or noticing that you're not okay, or noticing that you're somehow different. This opportunity to be really consciously choosing and then accepting the consequences. I think when her accountant was talking to her about taking on more staff, and she was saying, well, I want to have more time with my daughter, she's buying back her time. And the thing that really resonates with me is this agency, this ability to decide that I've got choices and I'm going to activate some of them. And there are consequences, there are costs. Which ones am I willing to suffer in this part of my life? And she's saying, well, I'm no longer wanting to be away from my daughter or my family or these important occasions. And the price of that is to have more staff, more people in my team. And really accepting that with responsibility. I really love that example from Sabine. We also talked about the self-leadership. I hope that you can spend some time reflecting on that idea. Before we can lead anybody else effectively, we need to be able to lead ourselves. And self-leadership requires acceptance, openness, experimentation, a willingness to be wrong or to fail, and to try something else. And I think Sabine gives us some really good examples of that. She also talked about that global perspective, and I think she really is unique in some ways in that she has worked across many different countries, including in Cameroon. Did you see her eyes light up when she talked about her passion project? I mean, such purpose, such heartfelt connection to that project, and huge ripples. And then she said, and when her aunt was no longer able to do it with her, it sort of lost some of its excitement. I think also, she had a child and other things were happening in her life. So being able to look at our lives as chapters, to have value and excitement and regard for ourselves about the things that we've done, even if they have finished or they weren't able to be ongoing. Earlier on in our conversation, Sabine talked about asking herself that question when she was in the NHS, working in the NHS, can I sustain this for another year? I think that's an interesting question too. You might have your own version of that, but this process of checking in and saying, is this working for me? Is it still working for me? Can it be working for me? When's the next review period that I might set up? So a lot to take home. I'm still chewing on a lot of the things. I hope Sabine and I actually can do another episode in a year or two. She's got so much experience to offer. She's such a willing participant in adopting the new technology and looking for ways to make it really personal to what she needs. I hope that you also have found some things to think about and maybe take some action on after listening to Dr. Sabine Fonderson. May you be well, and I'll see you next week. The content in this podcast is not intended to constitute or be a substitute for professional medical or psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your doctor or other qualified healthcare professional. This podcast represents the views of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of any entity we work with or for.